Hey, so let's talk about socialism for a minute. And this video is going to be specifically about socialism in Black America. So this is going to be mostly about how socialism in cities have keeping Black people poor, but it's going to be a doozy. So let's get into it. So the most common refrain we'll hear from people is that they're not a socialist in terms of a communist dictatorship like Russia or China. They'll say I'm a democratic socialist, and they'll quote the Nordic countries like Sweden and Finland or whatever. But we do have a democratic socialist of America and the United States, and I'm going to use all of the information from about socialism or what their goals should be from them, because that's going to be typically the out for a lot of people who are going to say, "Oh, I'm not a socialist. I'm a democratic socialist," or whatever. So, what is socialism? Socialism is the collective ownership of the means of production. So, in most give you an example, it would be like a factory. That factory should be collectively owned and things like that. So, let's talk about what the Democratic Socialists of America, what they say. I'm going to read some notes from their website, and what they believe and stuff like that. And then I'm going to argue against it. I'm not going to probably not going to use that many citations in this. It's just going to be me talking, because I want people. Again, people are not really swayed too much about hard facts and hard evidence. I want people to be able to sit back and think about how this stuff affects them in their life in their city, and be able to look around and recognize some of the things that I'm saying, and not be trying to drill people's facts with with names and dates and stuff like that, because a lot of that stuff is it's not going to really, it's going to roll off the back of their head. So let's just go through what Democratic Socialists of America say. They say the economy and society should be run democratically to meet public needs, not to make profits for a few. We don't want an all-powerful bureaucracy, but decisions should be made by those who are most affected. Resources are used to make money for capitalists rather than to meet human needs. That the workers and consumers who are affected by economic institutions should own and control them. Social ownership equals, and they call this social ownership. And social ownership would be worker co-ops, publicly owned enterprises managed by worker and consumer cooperative representatives. They said so when they often they fall into the subject of incentive. And the capitalist concept of incentive is self-interest. Like, so an individual will do whatever is in their own self-interest. The capitalist, the socialist or the Democratic Socialists of America would say, we don't agree with the capitalist assumption that starvation or greed are the only reasons people work. People enjoy their work if it is meaningful and enhances their lives. They work out of a sense of responsibility to their community and society. The long-term goal of socialism is to eliminate all but the most enjoyable kinds of labor. Employer needs to carry the burden of making work enjoyable or desirable by raising wages, offering benefits, and improving the work environment. A social, economic, and moral incentives will motivate people to work. All right, so I'm just going to argue against some of the points as they are presented. I'm not going to add anything again. I'm just going to go off the top of my head, just looking at different things. Just going to ask some questions, just some Socratic questioning. So they say the economy and society should be run democratically. Why? Democracy is based on voting, right? Why should you get a vote on certain things that involve my life? You shouldn't get a vote on those things. If I put my money forward, why do you get a vote? But here's the thing: it says the economy and I got tripped up by the word democracy. So economy and society should be run democratically to meet public needs, not to make profits for a few. Okay, now if you couple the concept of profits to the employer needs to carry the burden of making work enjoyable, desirable by raising wages, offering benefits, and improving the work environment. Okay, if you can't make a profit, or if profit is wrong, how are you going to raise wages, offer benefits, and improve the work environment? Now they will admit that, okay, well, private property or private businesses are with us for the long term. So basically, they're just basically saying we're going to take your profits, or your profits should go to other people, not to yourself, even though you're the one who paid for the factory to be built. You're the one paying the workers to build the things in the factory, and in some instances, you are actually a worker yourself. Yes, the owner and the CEO of a company actually works for the company. That's kind of a silly concept that people don't seem to understand. Or they will try to redefine the word work. That's another common thing when it comes to talking to people that vote a certain way, is that they will try to redefine words, or they'll try to fit their need. Like to think a CEO doesn't work for the company is stupid. A CEO works for the company. Okay, so let's not even go there. So then they say they don't want an all powerful bureaucracy or all power government bureaucracy. But my point is, it doesn't matter whether it's government or it's nonprofits or anything. Bureaucracy eats into the profit margin. When you look at nonprofits, like people always ask, where does the money for Black Lives Matter and all that, and police and teachers and all that type of stuff? When we give hundreds and trillions of dollars of this stuff of taxpayer money to these organizations, where does it go? Well, ask yourself, who runs these agencies? It's not that the rank and file teacher is sitting on his ass with hundreds and millions of dollars. That's not the case. He has a myriad of bosses above him, not just the principal, but also like vice principal. Like, why do you need a principal and a vice principal? Then you have all the people in the school board, all those people, and maybe they're politicians, but they get paid out of that pool of money. Then there's a bunch of other people who works in different districts. They get paid out of that money. So when you say we're going to fund education, you're basically funding the large bureaucracy that is a government bureaucracy in terms of education. And it will also exist in the labor market as well, because that's what unions are. Unions are large bureaucracies that soak up money from the workers. So if you have to pay union dues, you're paying for the union dues of you're paying the bill for the union lawyers and the union reps and all those people. They get paid out of your money, So if they say we don't want a large government bureaucracy, well, the unions operate also via government, because if there was no government back into unions, people would just fire everybody in the union. Like, that's the reason why people just don't fire unions, because they can't. The government won't let you. So the idea that, they don't want a large government bureaucracy is a lie. Because without a large government bureaucracy, you couldn't have a union. People would just fire the unions. So that's kind of silly. They say resources are used to make money for capitalists rather than to meet human needs. They don't understand that capitalists do meet human needs. Just because they don't understand for starters, the capitalist is human. So it's a silly dichotomy that they're creating. The second thing is, let me give you an example. Since the lockdowns have begun, the COVID lockdowns, people have been cracking their heads open, upset that Jeff Bezos has made so much money. And it's like, well, when you look and people have Amazon packages come into their house every day, of course Jeff Bezos is making more money. But that's his him using to meet human needs. People still need things even if they couldn't leave the house. So they specifically things like masks. People were ordering masks on Amazon. When they couldn't find them in the store, they were ordering them on Amazon. They were ordering tissue on Amazon. Things that they were stockpiling, they were buying them off Amazon and having it delivered to their house rather than going out and getting it. So the concept that capitalists don't they use their resources for their own profit. It's like they can only profit if they meet human needs. Capitalists don't just make money. Like you have to give your money to them, right? So you have to give your money to Jeff Bezos in order for him to have money. There is no law that says he gets money just for being Jeff Bezos, white male, straight millionaire. He doesn't just get money that way. You have to willingly give your money to him in exchange for whatever service he's providing. So this is common sense. So it says workers and consumers who are affected by economic institutions should own and control them. Okay, but what if workers and consumers have different agendas? I mean, that happens literally all the time. And I said I was going to talk about the city, and we could talk about the city, because in the city there are a few things that are like a food desert, right? Like somebody may say, well, I need to make a certain amount of money in order to feed my family. But if paying you a certain amount of money will increase the cost of labor, which indeed would then increase the cost of goods, Well, now the worker and the consumer are at odds, because if I can't afford to pay for the goods, I'm not going to buy it. And so that means you can't make as much money as you want to make. You can't just say, I want to make $30,000 per apple, because I'm not paying it for that. Because I'm not paying it. So now what are you going to do? You can make all the apples you want. I'm not buying it. This is simple supply and demand. There has to be an equality between supply and demand. Now, in the capitalist formulation, the capitalist decides, okay, I paid X, Y, and Z to produce this apple. I planted the seeds. I paid people to go out and pick them. I packaged them, cleaned them, all that type of stuff, and I'm now going to sell them. I'm going to sell them at a profit, but it doesn't mean just because it's going to be a profit doesn't mean it's going to be an astronomical plus 300% profit. It could be a modest profit. Profits could be anything from plus $1 to plus $100 million. Not everything is Nike. Nike, they have shoes built for like $10 and they sell them for like 400, and that's not me being accurate, but that's just giving you a rough idea of what the profit margins probably is when it comes to Nikes and how much it costs for them to get built. So you have to understand that they're just using words that are vague and they don't really mean anything, but also they're ignoring trade-offs, they're ignoring incentives, they're ignoring human nature, and they're ignoring the conflict that is inherent at all levels of economics. Workers and consumers are not in the same boat. The consumers buy what the workers produce. The workers want to get the most out of their work that they can. So the situation would just turn into workers versus consumers. Even if you kill all the capitalists and guillotine them, you're still going to have a workers versus consumers problem. Because the workers are going to be like, look, we worked all day on this. We want X amount of dollars. The consumers are going to say, no, I don't want to pay you that because this is not worth that. Okay. And then there's not a natural marriage that they're trying to create here. So they say social ownership, worker co-ops, whatever. You can create a worker co-op in the United States. The problem is going to be investment. Who's going to bring the money in and then split the money with a bunch of other people? Now you can pool the money. If you and 50 other people want to get together and start a company, you can, and work it. You can. That's not illegal in the United States. You can do that. You don't need to quote unquote up a revolution, a socialist revolution to do it. But it'll never get done because people know that it's always they might not get their money back out of this whole ordeal. That of all the money that they put in, they probably won't get that money back. So, and people, that's what profit is though, right? Everybody's looking for, and the worker is too. The worker is trying to make more money out of the situation versus what they put in. They want to get paid $15 an hour in minimum wage for doing minimal work. And that just doesn't make sense. We'll get to the minimum wage later though. So then they say, because the minimum wage is a big deal as far as I'm concerned. It's one of the worst things in the world, in my opinion, but we'll get there. He said, we don't agree with the capitalist assumption that starvation or greed are the only reasons people work. People enjoy their work if it is meaningful and enhances their lives. So this is, again, their idea of incentives, that incentives are not economic, but incentives are, metaphysical. And that, but this is the part where you really can just look, where I can sit down and just say the welfare state and housing. For people who might not know, and maybe you're ignorant or maybe you just haven't paid that much attention, but let's take one thing like housing. In the United States, you can get a Section 8 house, which is very low rent, if any rent at all, very, very low utility costs, so very, very low light bill, very, very low water bill, and you have to be under a certain income level in order to qualify for this house. So what that means is people may continue to work because they have to buy clothes and they have to buy food. But what they'll do is they will purposefully take low skilled work, meaning they'll take a small job, a job that doesn't pay that well, and they will keep their income below a certain level because they know if their income goes above a certain level, they'll lose their benefit. They'll lose the house. The rent will go up. The utilities will go up. And this is basic common sense, again, you don't need a citation for this. You can just find people in Section 8 houses, they will choose to not work at all because working might change their living standards. Now, the basic law of this is a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. In other words, what I have right now is often better than what might come later, especially if what might come later is not guaranteed. A guaranteed thing is good and better than something in the future. So the bird in the hand is going to be my food stamps, my Section 8 house. I have it guaranteed to me every month. Is going to be given to me. If I make more than and break this qualification and I no longer qualify for food stamps and Section 8, then I might lose this stuff. Now, granted, I may become middle class and be able to move out to the suburbs, but that's a risk, and people are naturally risk averse, and some people are more risk averse than others. There's a difference between, age and gender and race and stuff like that. Some people are more risk averse than others, but in the neighborhoods, in the hoods, especially where I live, you will see people who are incredibly risk averse when it comes to, taking or trying to make a lot more money because they may lose benefits. They like that guaranteed money. They like that guaranteed, check every month, that food stamps. They love that shit. They love that guaranteed shit every month. And the fact that the Democratic Socialists of America are saying that they don't believe that, it's like, fuck, have you not been to the city? And that's how you know a lot of these people are just like middle class white folks. Because if you can just, basically some of the most spiteful people as far as welfare is concerned are middle class people who live in the hood. Because they end up getting crunched about everything. They end up being the ones pay all the fucking property taxes, even though other people live in Section 8 houses. They're the ones who end up paying cash for their steak while other people get food stamps to pay for their steaks. And they're the people who are the most angry because they work for, and this is wealth redistribution, again, which is another socialist thing where, income redistribution is, wealth redistribution too, but wealth is assets. And a lot of people don't really have a lot of assets. So let's just use income redistribution where you will work, I'll use myself as an example. When I used to work in a factory, I worked 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. And from 4 in the afternoon till 4 in the morning. Now, when I was a kid, I was okay with socialism because I caught the bus. So I was like, okay, I got to catch the bus. How else are the buses going to get paid for unless I pay taxes, right? But then you start realizing, you're getting double taxed in this situation because you have to pay, you've already paid the bus drivers and all that type of stuff through your taxes. But now you have to pay a fare as well, So they double dipping in this shit. And then also you get angry about the quality of the services. So, the buses run late, teachers, your property taxes pay for teachers and the teachers suck and all that type of stuff. There are different things to go into this, but, these are bits of socialism. I'm not saying that America is a socialist system, but there's tiny bits of socialism that they're like raw potatoes in a stew. They're quite obvious when you bite into it that this is bullshit. But they said that people will do their work if they enjoy it. And that sometimes people feel a responsibility. And that is true. There are a lot of people who are civically minded and they want to do labor that is not always lucrative as far as profit driven, or they're not going to make a lot of money. Teachers is one of those things. Police officers is another. Then you have the personal people who have followed their personal goals. So they might want to be a musician. They might want to be an artist. They might want to be a writer or whatever. These things are not necessarily going to be profitable for you in the future. And you just kind of have to accept that. Again, that's a trade-off. You could, if you wanted to, invest in the stock market and be a hedge fund manager or something like that, you'll make a lot more money. But, it's not exactly a quote unquote civically minded thing to do. It's more civically minded to be a teacher. But, not everybody needs a teacher all the time. And you may say, well, people don't need hedge fund managers at all. It's like people who want their hedge funds managed need hedge fund managers. And that's the point. It's like people have the ability to make a choice. And that's ultimately the central problem with socialism, I'm almost 20 minutes into this video, but what I said is these people can't know what everybody wants. You can't know everybody's needs. So when they say things like um, the economy and society should be run democratically to meet public needs, you don't know what the public needs. Most people have no idea what they need. And then you have people who innovate and they create new needs. Like people didn't know that they needed cell phones until cell phones were created. And cell phones can only be created if somebody takes the time to create them. And people will only take the time to create them if there's going to be a profit in creating it. Right? So if there's not going to be any profit motive, there's no benefit to creating it. Why would they create it? Why would you create the computer if there's no reason for you to have a computer? People don't understand this keeps a lot of people poor, is the lack of desire for innovation. Poor countries tend to look for ways to increase their way of life, you create buckets to get water from wells. So now you don't have to carry water in your hands. Right. But there has to be a benefit to it. People have to see, and this is from the book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, is that, it's not just enough for you to make a thing. You have to also create a need for the thing, because the need for the thing is what sells it. When you create, if I transporting water from a well to my village or to my home, just say I'm some poor African, I could do it in my hands. I'll probably drop water left and right trying to walk with, water in my hands. And then I'll also be able to get just only a little bit of water. But if I create a bucket or a gourd or something like that and carry water in that, more people will be like, oh yeah, that's smart, I'll do that. And then more people will do it. And if I make gourds, then I can sell them. I can make a gourd and sell it, hollow it out and sell it, because there's nothing but like a pumpkin. It's like a melon or something like that. And you could hollow it out and sell it. And then you can make more money and you can sell more gourds, and then more people can get them, more people can use them, and more people can have more water in the village. That's just common fucking sense. So, a lot of people can work not just from home, but can work from anywhere because they have a cell phone. So they might have, you might see people like back in the days of BlackBerries, people used to do, Excel spreadsheets and things like that on their phone. You can still do that. I have Excel, Microsoft Excel on my phone. I have Microsoft Word on my phone. I can write novels on my phone, which is what I do. You could do just about anything on your phone. You can create videos on your phone. You can do whatever you want. There's a lot of people who have YouTube channels that is mostly phone videos, because you can produce with just your cell phone. The things are endless, but you have to have the desire, the incentive to innovate and to allow people to innovate and do it. The socialist system destroys that incentive, and they can argue all day that it won't. It doesn't matter what they think. It only matters what's true. And you can actually walk around anywhere and see that it's true. So they said, so people work out a sense of responsibility, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? There's a lot, of course, there's no personal responsibility and all this type of stuff to making your employer take care of you and all that type of stuff. So let's talk about the bits of the extra bits of socialism that take place in the Black community, most specifically wealth redistribution or income redistribution. I've already talked about the government building houses for people, the government giving people food stamps. But one of the things that is also a problem is protectionism, the labor laws. I'm going to just tack this on here. Like, I'm not going to just say labor laws are socialism. I think that's a bit reductionist. And what I'm going to say is that a lot of the things that I'm going to say, the 2 or 3 things I'm going to mention here, are going to be favored by Democratic Socialists of America because they tend to believe in these sorts of things. Number 1 is the minimum wage. The number 2 is unions. The number 3 is child labor laws. Now, I could go on and on about these different things. Like, we could talk about zoning boards. We could talk about all that kind of stuff. And hell, I may. We'll see if I get there, because I'm not really putting that much thought into this. But let's talk about the minimum wage laws. So the minimum wage laws, how it works, and I'm pretty sure every major Western English speaking country in the world has a minimum wage law that I know of. And the minimum wage laws They're discrimination against the poor. They're discrimination against the young. And if you add those two things together, you get the hood. If young people cannot find jobs, if young people cannot get experience, then they can't work. So let's work through an example. Let's say, and I used to be a 16-year-old young black man. Let's say you're 16 and you're black, and you're from the hood, and you live in a single family home, single parent home. Let's say you just have a mom, and your mom works, but she goes out, works 10, 12 hours a day, come home, she can barely make ends meet. If you're 14 or 15 years old, if you're 16, you probably can go out and get a job at KFC or Wendy's or something like that, right? But if you're 14, which is just 2 years previous, you can't work. You're a child. You're technically a child, so you can't work. So your consumption levels are pretty much the same. You're consuming more as a 14-year-old than you were when you were born. So, and then you have more desires. So you want video games, you want clothes, you want shoes, you want stuff. Your mom might be able to take care of the rent and might be able to take care of the food. But all the little things that you might want to impress your little girlfriends and stuff like that, she can't afford that shit. So this is the impetus for people to go out and sell drugs and commit crime. Not because they're poor, but because there are extra things that they want in life that they cannot get from a single family, from a single income in their household. And then if you say that they can't work because they're 14 or 15 years old, this of course ties into the child labor problem. Because it seems like I'm talking about child labor first. Since you can't go out and you can't work, then the only way for you as a 14-year-old to make money is for you to go out and sell dope. Or if you go out and steal cars or steal Cadillac converters or whatever. And that's the big thing in Detroit, is stealing Cadillac converters, stealing tires. It's just, that's common sense. You will go out and do it because if you can steal and make $100 and go out and buy some gym shoes, why not? If you can sell some dope, go out and get you a PlayStation, why not? I mean, again, I've said in videos before, it is not about bread. It's not about food. It is about the extras in life that kids don't have that they want to go out and steal for and rob for. But, the minimum wage is a barrier to that. The first starters, the child labor laws are a barrier to that. Because if you're 14, your mom is struggling, you don't have a lot, you might get made fun of for being poor. You're definitely probably not going to get no pussy for being, if you're a male. If you're a girl, you might get a guy to take care of you. But if you're a boy, you're probably not going to get a girlfriend, not a serious one at 14. You might not get the girl you want, the cheerleader that you want. She's probably going to be banging the drug dealers. So you're probably not going to get her unless you get some money. And the only way for you to get some money at 14 or 15 or whatever, when you can't legally work, is for you to go out and sell dope, steal Cadillac converters, steal cars. Okay? That's just how it works. You go out and rob, go out and steal. That's your incentive to go work. Right there. But if you are 14 and you can go out and get a job, if you're 13, 12 or whatever, it can keep you out of crime for starters, but it can also help you help your family. So that means that you can, if your mom is struggling, you can go out and get a job. Now you can always cut your consumption. That's what I did when I was a kid. I couldn't work when I was 14, 15. I would just cut my consumption. I didn't want video games or stuff like that. I didn't get shit until Christmas because I already knew that we were struggling all the time. I had 2 little brothers. So, cutting your consumption helps. But of course, it still kind of weighs a little heavily on your parents that, that your friends have things that you don't have. That stuff kind of has an effect. And that's like it affects you. It kind of affects your mom and stuff too, your family. It has that effect that I can't take care of you the way other people's parents can take care of them. And you have to take that into account. But you can ease that a little bit by going out and getting it yourself, if I can go out and get a job, even if it's just mopping floors, I can get some experience mopping floors. How can I get experience mopping floors? Well, what I can do is I can show that I have initiative by getting out and going out and finding a job. I can show that I'm responsible by working that job every day, showing up on time, doing whatever I'm asked to do. And I can get experience because sometimes when you do a job, you're not just coming to do that one job. You're going to get trained to do other things. If you come in and mop the floor at the grocery store for 2 or 3 hours a day. Then one day he may say, the owner may say, I need you to work the cash register. Or, hey, I need you to count the money in the back room. Now you're getting experience doing other things, and you got your foot in the door by mopping the floor. That's the case everywhere. Like, there are people who became CEOs of banks after they worked in the mailroom for 2 or 3 years. Internships, things like that. Like, people know this shit works. You don't need people know how it works. An internship works that way. You go and you work somewhere for 6 months for free. They hire you in at a base pay, and then you can work your way up. But the minimum wage will prevent you from doing that. The minimum wage will prevent you, because now if you work there, you have to pay somebody $8 an hour or whatever. If they have no experience, if they have no history of work, if they have, and if they're a kid, they have no education. Why are you paying them? Why is it mandatory for you to pay them $8 an hour? That doesn't make any sense. Now, on multiple levels, this is a problem, the minimum wage, because not only does it prevent people who already have a business from hiring more people, but it will also prevent some people from even going into business. Because along with if you wanted to make a bakery, it might be a thing where you start the bakery and now you're the only employee, or you and your children, or you and your husband, or you and your boyfriend, or whatever. You are the only people who work in the goddamn bakery, because you can't afford to hire anybody else. Because if you hire somebody else, the state says you have to pay them X amount of dollars, and you can't afford it. So when people are like, businesses go under in X amount of years, it's like, yeah, because the state keep changing the fucking laws. They have all these regulations, these bits of regulation. We can get into the bits of regulation. That's just too much. I'm talking about big issues at this point. Minimum wage and unions and child labor laws and stuff like that. But that's the important thing. Like, you have a lot of college students that come out of college right now. They have education. They have no fucking experience, right? So they may get set up with an internship. They might not, depending on their school. But the important thing is they have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, or whatever, but they have no experience in the workforce. So now they have a problem getting a job. And this is what you have in America right now. It's not just people have useless degrees like underwater pipe cleaning and stuff like that, or underwater basket weaving, they call it. If you're an underwater pipe weaver, you probably make a lot of money. Underwater welding or something like that, you can make a grip. But if you're, a basket weaver and you went to school for some art thing, you probably went $50,000, $60,000 in debt for something that didn't give you any experience. So that's a problem. That's the issue. And this is what a big issue you have in the cities. All these kids go through all these years of schooling. They're not allowed to work. They get put into these years of schooling, or they might work, right before college, a couple of months before college, just to get some pocket money. But most of them are not allowed to work. They don't even think about working because they're in school. Then they go through school, and as they're 23, they walk out of college with a degree and no ability to work. That's the problem. And the minimum wage is a barrier, because you have to be worth a certain thing. If you're 18 years old, let's say there's I walked down the street. For instance, I walked down the street the other day. I saw Burger King was hiring. They're hiring for, I forget what the hell they call it, but it was some position. Okay. If the minimum wage was $15 an hour, is a 16-year-old, does they have enough experience for that? No. How could you have any real experience at 16 years old? How could you really have any experience at 19? Compared to somebody who might be 35 or 36 and need a job. If somebody is 35, 36, 27, 28, and they need a job, Burger King is more likely to hire them. Why? Because they have a history of work, and they probably have families and things like that. They can go in there and guilt trip them like, hey, I got a son, I got a daughter, I need this job. Here is my history of going to, of work. I worked in Burger King or McDonald's or Wendy's when I was 19, 20, 21. But you might be able to get that job at 14 or 15 if there were no child labor laws and there was no minimum wage. Because then you could be like, the guy who's 25, he needs a certain level of income to take care of himself. I don't, because I still live with my parents. So I can go in there and be like, we're going to pay you $4 an hour to mop the floor, or $4 an hour to flip burgers. And he'd be like, great, it's better than nothing. I can go $4 an hour, 2-3 weeks, I can buy me some shoes. 2-3 weeks, I can buy a video game. And that's it. As opposed to the guy who's twice my age, and he needs to pay rent. I don't have to pay rent. So it keeps people who have some advantages from being knocked out of the market. So being young is an advantage in the marketplace because you get to, people will hire you because they can pay you less. And being black is another thing that was also a benefit in society because people discriminated against you. They paid you less. Now I have to go into that now because the second thing is the unions. I've already talked about child labor laws. I've already talked about minimum wage. And I'm going to talk about unions. So unions were created for the purpose of racism, but most of it, a lot of this stuff you'll see is actually tied together. For instance, the unions are tied with the minimum wage. If you want a hard data thing, it's the David Bacon Act of 1931. But you have to go way back to the slavery times to explain this. And I read a book. I forget what book it was, but they talked about when slavery ended. The slaves still had skills. Now people think that slavery was just picking cotton and that was it. No, slaves had real skills. Like they used to be able to build tables, build ships. They worked on factories, and so they built and they was able to fix equipment. They know how to use certain equipment. Some of them were even hired out to do certain things like painting and not construction, things like that. Slaves had skills, so they still had their skills even if they didn't have a boss. So they didn't know what their labor was worth. So they wandering around town looking for work. And all the white people owned all the businesses or whatever. And so the white man says to you, okay, you were a carpenter when you were a slave. I can only pay you a nickel. The slave would be like, great, I'll take that nickel. And it didn't matter that the white man was making a dime. Because especially if I was a slave, I had children, that nickel can go a long way. It's better than having no money. So I'm going to go work for this guy who's going to pay me a nickel. And I go and I work for that nickel. And maybe I tell my friends, hey, Mr. Johnson will give you a nickel if you know how to, build, help with this carpentry business. You know how to put up a wall or, do drywall. I'm pretty sure there was no drywall then, but whatever. If you know how to paint or whatever at the time, you can come work for Mr. Johnson. He'll give you a nickel. And I would show up probably the next day, a couple of days later, 3-4 people with me. And Mr. Johnson, these my friends, it's my brother, it's my nephew, they need jobs. Mr. Johnson, I give you all the nickel. All right, fine. We just go take this nickel. Next, the white dudes who are there making a dime, they sitting around eating their bologna sandwiches or whatever the fuck. And they're like, what's going on? Why are all these niggers in here? There's a lot of niggers in here now. And they only make a nickel. And you would think like, ha ha ha, the white man is making more money. And it's like, yeah, but if 2 Negroes equals 1 white man, then the boss is eventually going to start firing white guys because I can hire 2 Negroes and get this job done twice as fast, because time is money. Okay. So if the white man wants a dime for his job and I can hire 2 Negroes for that, I'll fire the white guy, or I'll just tell him I ain't got no work for you, hire 2 Negroes. So the white man, in order to fight this, what they would do is they would form unions. They would get together in groups and they would go to the boss and say, look, all of us want to be paid a dime a piece. Nobody should be able to come in after us and say they want to work for a nickel. Everybody should work for a dime. That's how it works. Everybody should work for a dime. And then, or we walk away. Right? Now, the boss may say, I don't give a shit. You want to work I don't want to pay, 50 cents for 5 white dudes when I can pay 50 cents, and get 10 black people. I don't need it. 10 niggers. I don't care. I don't need it. I don't need your problems. Fuck off. So what the white man did is they went to the government. He should have to negotiate with us. He should have to, by law, negotiate with us and pay us what we want. And then the government says, yes, they check that box. So that's how the unions formed today. And for a long time, black people were banned from unions. But guess what? That also kills jobs because we used to have a thriving automobile industry in the United States. It wasn't always GM, Chrysler, and Ford, and that's it. There used to be, a lot of different car companies, but they started falling off and going out of business, partly because, cars wouldn't sell, but also partly because the cost of labor kept going up. Henry Ford was beneficial in that when increasing the cost of labor. He used to pay people $5 an hour. He was trying to put his opponents out of business, so he would raise the cost of labor beyond what the opponents could pay. And so all of their good workers would come to him and leave them with either shitty workers or, unable to keep up with the pay. And therefore the workers didn't want to work there. And that was, everything is about trade-offs. And that's kind of how unions were able to protect their jobs. And you can actually look up, now if you go to Google, unions are racist, what you're going to get is unions fight racism, because that's 2020 Google. That's their propaganda that unions are not racist. But if you Google like Samuel Gompers of AFL-CIO fame, he'll say things like, the unions, the point of unions is to protect white jobs and stuff like that. And everybody knew this. For years, the unions were racist. That's why there used to be Negro unions. Okay, just like there used to be a Negro League baseball for the same reason. So the idea that unions are good for black people is not always the case. The unions are the reason why Detroit and Gary, Indiana, and a lot of the steel industry and a lot of the automotive industry and a lot of the manufacturing has left. People will say, "Oh, well, it's the fault of the capitalists. They're just greedy, looking out for profits." It's like that's part of it because they need profits in order to pay workers and in order to do all the other things that go into the company, like marketing and advertising, which costs money that the workers are not involved in. The workers are not involved in advertising. They're not involved with the accountants. They're not involved with the human resources, which is one of the most useless things in the world, is human resources. But the same people who say you need to have a high minimum wage will also say you need to have human resources. Human resources is basically busy work. All they do is sit around and create rules. It's a bureaucracy. It's bullshit. But they'll demand that you have it. Okay, and which is garbage. But at the same time, man, if you look at, there's bits of this. You can look at it just from your neighborhood. Or your neighborhood or your city, what your city used to be famous for, and is it gone now? Like I live in Detroit. Detroit used to be big for automotive. I asked the question, where did the automotive industry go? It bounced and went to Mexico and went to China and went everywhere else. Why? Because the cost of labor kept going up. Why did the cost of labor keep going up? Because of unions. Why were there unions? Because, the people who had jobs wanted to keep out the people who didn't have jobs. So it's labor protections. You wanted to protect your job from being usurped by other people who might want to do the job and do it for cheaper and actually go to fucking work and actually do the fucking job. That's another thing about unions, is that unions protect lazy motherfuckers. I used to work in a union. I can tell you. The 80-20 rule, as far as 20% of the people produce a lot of the wealth and production of a society or of a population, it's actually true. Only about 20% of the people showed up to work on time. Only about 20% of the people actually cared about the quality of the work that they did. It was a guaranteed check, guaranteed money. Nobody else was going to make, you could almost guarantee that people were not going to get a raise unless you got one too. The promotions and things like that. If you had seniority, then you could almost block people from getting raises and stuff like that. It's the fucking UAW, and it's not just because unions are corrupt, but that's because, again, they increase the cost of labor. Kickstarter is another one. And I know I'm not using, neighborhood things, but you can Google this stuff. Kickstarter had a union. And Kickstarter, less than a year into their union, they ended up having to restructure because the union labor costs went up. Vox Media, Vice Media, all these people who produce all this pro-labor shit, they've been trying to keep out unions forever. The Young Turks, another one, been trying to keep out unions forever, and people want to unionize, and they don't want it. Why don't they want unions if they love unions so much? Because unions increase the cost of labor. That's the reason. And you increase the cost of labor, you have to cut jobs, because increasing the cost of labor does not, it increases the cost of your product. So if you want to know why a car is $40,000 when a car used to be $200, it's because, it's partly because of unions. It's impossible to say this 100% anything, but it's a good causal analysis to look at, the cost of union labor and the cost of the cost of items going up. Now, another thing is zoning boards. Zoning boards is where can you build a thing? Can you build a strip club here? Can you build a gas station here? The government will then pick and choose where people can build things, and where things can be built, and how much. Like you can't, sometimes in the city, they won't let you grow a garden in the city, in your own backyard, even though you supposedly own the land. Why? Because it might be like a zoning violation or some shit like that. And then of course they'll claim it's for your protection or the protection of other people. Like sometimes they won't let you have certain animals as pets, even though you might want to, like you might want to make your own milk, but they might say, oh no, you can't have a cow in the city. It's a violation of some type of fucking ordinance or whatever, zoning ordinance. You have to have X, Y, and Z amount of space and all that type of shit. That type of stuff prevents people from creating jobs too. It's zoning boards is one of the big reasons why you have mental health facilities parked in the middle of neighborhoods. People, there's a lot of NIMBYism. Like, oh, these things are cool, but what NIMBYism is not in my backyard. So there'll be like a lot of cool stuff, or they'll say it's cool stuff, but they don't want it in their backyard. Like strip clubs are nice, but not in my backyard. Build it somewhere else, not across the street from this church. You can't have a strip club near a school, which that makes sense. Like you can't sell alcohol near schools, like stuff like that, but zoning boards is really, but the really big problem with zoning boards is the amount of cost that it comes when it comes to building a house, because it's cheap. If you can just buy land and build on it like you can in Texas, then you can build a house pretty quick, pretty easy. But these are just some practical things that, I don't know, some people are going to disagree with me on a lot of this stuff, and maybe some of my definitions are a little bit off, but I think I'm mostly accurate in what I'm saying here. But I just want to tell people, like, you should be able to walk outside and see why, a lot of socialist ideas and a lot of these big public policy ideas that socialists produce, like labor laws and things like that, are bad. Like if you want to know why, sometimes people don't want to pay taxes, just go outside and look at, poor quality pickup, garbage pickup. They might be late. Buses might be late. Schools are shit. Like people don't want to pay for that stuff, but the socialists want you to pay for it and pay through the nose for it. Now, it's not always wealth redistribution, which is what a lot of, because a lot of people don't have wealth, so they don't really see it, but it's income redistribution. If you work let's say you work for $5 an hour, you work 12 hours a day, 12 times 5 is what, $70? So you make $70 a day, and then the government come in and take their percentage of it and give you the rest. It's like, that's bullshit, man. Who else? And and the crazy thing is, I'm gonna end on this note. Is you want to know what you call a person who does not have to worry about their own food, their own clothes, their own housing. You call them a slave, because slaves didn't have to worry about that shit either. Slaves didn't have to take care of themselves. And somebody else decided what the slave needed. And it comes to this video that I saw it was a slave narrative by a man named Fountain Hughes, Fountain Hughes, I think. Fountain Hughes. And he said he didn't have a pair of shoes until he was 13 years old because they didn't feel like he needed shoes. Like that's when somebody else is just deciding your needs for you. Okay. That's when the Democratic Socialists of America say that, to meet public needs, that society and the economy should meet public needs. Somebody decided that he didn't need shoes. I was like, you don't know what this man needs. Somebody might decide that, and plus we're all different. We all need different, as far as calories is concerned, different levels of exercise, different levels of medicine, things like that. Nobody knows what everybody needs. It's impossible to know that. The only thing you can do is create a system where people have the option to fulfill their own needs. And the only way for them to do that is in a capitalist system. All right, so like this video, share this video. Feel free to argue with me in the comment section below. And I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.